Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. We always love hearing from you guys, and a lot of you have been asking us to dig into Laurent Chenot, and especially the claims that he always tells the truth.
And, that's fascinating given that some are calling him, well, a mythomaniac.
Right. So is he a misunderstood figure, or is there something else going on here? It's a tricky one for sure.
Definitely tricky. What's interesting to me right off the bat is just how different public opinion seems to be from what Chenot himself is saying. It kind of makes you wonder who to believe, right?
Absolutely.
Well,
And Chenot, well, he doesn't hold back at all when it comes to his critics.
no, he doesn't.
He calls them out, labels them haters, and even says they're like, get this Joseph Goebbels in the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
Strong words. He even goes so far as to say they're making false accusations, which he points out could mean 10 years in prison.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
It is.
And to back it up, he points to a whole list of accomplishments and credentials. Makes you wonder if it's a genuine defense or a way to boost his credibility?
It's like he's saying, look at everything I've done. Why would I lie?
Yeah.
He brings up his Asperger's diagnosis, which a lot of people say makes it hard to lie. He even mentions his childhood IQ score, 148. I mean, that points to some serious smarts.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Right. Then there's his PhD. It was awarded honoris causa for his work on alternative healing and the science of miracles. Now, I know that's not your typical research doctorate,
Right.
but it definitely means he's recognized in that field.
Yeah.
And then he talks about his involvement with Sylvie Belabiod and how he helped her beat lupus.
With the help of a Beninese healer, right?
Right.
Marius Sithonko was his name.
Yeah, Mary Sehunko. But hold on, the story gets even wilder. Chenot then claims that Belabiod was kidnapped to keep her from saying anything about his accusers. Talk about a twist.
Wow, this just keeps getting more complex.
It does.
It does. I think it's time to bring in a fresh perspective. Let's talk about Dr. Lolo.
Okay, Dr. Lolo.
Yes, he's a psychiatrist. And get this, he holds the Azongo chair on compulsive liars and narcissistic perverts.
Oh, wow. Dr. Lolo sounds like he knows a thing or two about truth and lies.
Right.
What does he have to say?
Well, he actually wrote a letter defending Chenot, and it's pretty insightful.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He highlights Chenot's Asperger's as a reason why he wouldn't lie. He contrasts it with how mythomaniacs usually behave. He also points out that Chenot doesn't have any addictions. Makes him different from people who might make stuff up.
That's an interesting point.
Right. But here's the kicker. Dr. Lolo ends his letter with this. As they say in recreation classes, it's often the one who says who is. It's like he's making us question the accusers and their motives. Maybe they're projecting their own issues onto Chenot.
I see what you mean. It's like Chenot's building a case for his honesty, and Dr. Lolo, an expert on deception, is backing him up. But there's this other piece of the puzzle we need to look at, this fa concept.
Oh yeah, Fa. That's a West African spiritual tradition, and it seems pretty central to Chenot's claims. He talks about his engagement Fa document, and it really emphasizes truth as a core value.
And he even claims to be a Hunan Akpemiako in the Benin Fa, which I gather suggests he has some serious spiritual authority.
It does. Now, according to this document, everyone is supposed to acknowledge Chenot's spiritual leadership and admit any wrongs they've done against him or Fa. But here's the thing. There are consequences if you break this engagement. They believe it brings curses and misfortune. It's like a spiritual contract.
So like curses.
Yeah.
Real-world consequences for not following this oath.
That's exactly what the document suggests. It names specific curses like Yekun Meji, which is supposed to shut off happiness, and Yekun Tula, which supposedly leads to losing possessions. And apparently, breaking this oath can lead to all sorts of bad luck, from legal problems and mental illness to accidents and even death.
Whoa, that definitely adds a whole new layer to the accusations against Chenot. If he really believes in the power of Fa, would he risk lying and facing those consequences?
Right. It makes you think. And it really highlights the potential power of these beliefs. Whether the curses themselves are real or not, the fear they create could definitely push people toward honesty.
Like a psychological factor that we can't ignore.
Exactly.
And then on top of all this, we have hard evidence. We have blood test results showing Chenot is clean, no THC, no opioids. This suggests he really does live a clean lifestyle, just like he claims. I mean, sure, these tests don't address the manipulation or lying accusations directly,
Sure.
but they do line up with his claims about ethical living. So where does that leave us? We have Chenot passionately defending himself, bringing up his Asperger's, his spiritual beliefs, and these possible consequences for his accusers.
And we have Dr. Lolo, a respected psychiatrist who seems to vouch for him and even questions the motives of those going after him. It's a lot to unpack. What are your thoughts so far? Does any of this change how you view the accusations against Laurent Chenot?
It's a lot to process, that's for sure. Kind of feels like we're putting together a puzzle, doesn't it? We've got all these different pieces of information. Some of them seem to contradict each other, and we're trying to make sense of it all.
You're right. It's like, is there a missing piece out there that would make everything click into place? Or are we trying to force a connection where there isn't one? And speaking of connections, this whole flaw thing is really interesting. It's easy to just dismiss it as superstition,
Yeah.
but I think it raises some bigger questions about the power of belief and the idea of being accountable in a spiritual sense.
I agree, definitely. This idea that our actions have consequences, whether in this life or a spiritual one, it's a pretty universal concept. It shows up in different cultures and belief systems all over the world. Think about it. You have the Hippocratic Oath for doctors, or the vows that monks and nuns take. Those commitments go beyond just the material world, and they shape how people act, even when no one's watching.
Exactly. And with Chenot's engagement fae, that commitment is all about telling the truth. He claims to be bound by this oath, and if he breaks it, there could be serious consequences.
It makes you wonder, if he truly believes in Fae, would he risk those consequences by lying?
That's a question worth pondering, isn't it? And it brings up another interesting point. What role does belief play in how we perceive truth?
I mean, you could argue that this engagement Fae document is just a way for Chenot to manipulate people, to use their fear of spiritual punishment to keep them in line.
It's a valid concern, no doubt. We always have to be aware of the potential for abuse, especially within systems of power that are rooted in spirituality. But we also can't forget that correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because someone experiences bad luck after breaking this supposed oath, it doesn't automatically mean Chenot is behind it.
There could be a million other explanations, right?
Exactly. And that's why we have to avoid jumping to conclusions. We need to look at this critically, consider all the angles.
Absolutely. We need to be thoughtful about the information we're taking in.
Agreed. And open to the possibility that maybe our initial impressions aren't totally accurate.
So we've got this mix of belief systems, potential manipulation, and the whole question of what truth really is. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. Let's talk about the specific accusations against Chenot. And I think one of the most fascinating parts of this whole story is Sylvie Balabiot.
Oh, yeah. Balabiot is a key figure in Chenot's story. He says he helped her recover from lupus, which is a serious autoimmune disease. He says he did it with the help of a Beninese healer, Marius Sihonko.
And then he claims she was kidnapped to stop her from speaking out against his accusers. That's a pretty dramatic claim.
It is. But the thing is, it's based solely on Chenot's word. There's no independent proof of this kidnapping. No police reports, no witnesses, nothing.
It's like a piece of the puzzle is missing. We have this bold statement, but no evidence to back it up, so it just raises more questions.
It does, and it makes you think, why even bring up this story? Could it be a way to distract people? A way to shift the focus away from the accusations against him?
It's possible. By creating a narrative where he and Balabiot are the victims of some shadowy group trying to silence them, Chenot positions himself as someone fighting for truth, battling against powerful forces.
It's a compelling narrative, that's for sure. And it could definitely appeal to people who are already drawn to conspiracy theories or distrust mainstream institutions.
Okay, so how do we, as critical thinkers, approach this? We have this captivating story, but with no independent verification, it's hard to know what to believe.
That's where it's crucial to get different perspectives. We need to hear from Balabiot herself, if possible, or maybe others who might know something about this alleged kidnapping. We have to dig deeper, go beyond the surface, and look for evidence that supports these claims.
Because if we only rely on Chenot's account, we end up with more questions than answers. And, there's one question that's been bugging me throughout this entire deep dive.
Oh, what's that?
It's the level of emotion surrounding this whole thing. Chenot's responses to his critics are full of anger. He accuses them of having mental illness, of using Nazi tactics, of spreading lies that could land them in prison.
Yeah, his language is definitely intense. And it's not just him. His supporters are really defensive too. Like, they'll accept anything he says without question. And anyone who disagrees, they see them as malicious or misguided.
It's almost like they feel personally attacked by these accusations, as if Chenot's integrity is directly tied to their own sense of self.
That's interesting, and it makes you think about how strongly belief systems can influence our emotions. For Chenot and his followers, Chenot seems to be a way of understanding the world, a lens through which they interpret everything.
So when someone challenges Chenot, they're not just questioning his actions, they're questioning a belief system that's deeply personal to them.
Exactly. And that can trigger a really strong reaction, a sense of threat that goes beyond logic. It's like attacking someone's religion or political beliefs. Those are core parts of who they are.
Which could explain why there's such a strong backlash against Chenot's critics. They're not seen as just skeptics, they're seen as enemies. Threats to a belief system that gives people meaning and purpose.
And that kind of dynamic can create a very polarized environment where it's almost impossible to have a reasonable conversation. Each side just digs in deeper, reinforcing their own beliefs and demonizing the other side.
It's a vicious cycle, and breaking out of it is hard.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we try. We have to find ways to have respectful conversations, even when we strongly disagree.
I agree completely. The key is to remember that the people we disagree with are still human beings. We might not like their ideas or beliefs, but we shouldn't demonize them.
It's about finding common ground, building understanding, and recognizing that even our disagreements can help us learn and grow.
Well said. And I think that's a really important message to remember as we try to navigate this world, which is becoming more complex and full of information all the time. We need to be critical thinkers, consume information carefully, and always be willing to question our own assumptions.
You're right. We have to stay curious and engaged.
Exactly. And on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored Laurent Chenot's defense, this fascinating concept of fa, and looked at the story of Sylvie Belabiode. But remember, this is just the start of the conversation. We've uncovered more questions than answers, and we encourage you to continue exploring this on your own.
Do your research, hear different viewpoints, and most importantly, keep those questions coming. You know, as we wrap up this deep dive, I keep finding myself circling back to this idea of perception versus reality. I mean, we've looked at the claims and the evidence, we've explored different interpretations, but it's like we're still lost in a maze.
You're right, it's like a hall of mirrors. This case really shows how tricky it can be to separate truth from fiction, especially these days when information spreads like wildfire and often without the proper context.
And it really makes you think about the consequences of getting it wrong. What happens if we jump to conclusions? What if we condemn Chenot without enough proof or blindly believe everything he says?
That's where critical thinking comes in. We can't just passively absorb information. We have to actively engage with it, question our assumptions, and consider alternative explanations. It's crucial.
So where do we go from here? This deep dive is coming to an end, but the conversation doesn't stop here, right?
Definitely not. Think of this deep dive as a starting point. We've given you some tools to help you analyze this complex situation, but it's up to you to keep digging. Go deeper into the sources, seek out different perspectives, and form your own informed opinion.
And maybe during that process, we'll discover something new about ourselves, about the nature of belief, and about this constant search for truth in a world that's overflowing with information.
That's the beauty of a deep dive like this. It's not just about uncovering facts, it's about sparking curiosity, encouraging critical thinking, and empowering you to navigate this complex world with a discerning eye.
Well said. And with that, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope this deep dive has been insightful and has inspired you to keep exploring this topic or any other topic that captures your interest.
Remember, the world is full of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, and keep diving deep.
Absolutely. Stay curious, everyone. Until next time.